All right, Culture Wars for Monday morning. A article came out from Opta analyst placing MLS in the top 10 leagues in the world. Jason,
Yes.
is Major League Soccer a top 10 league?
Is it? Well, let's consider what Optus said before we give our thoughts on this, okay? So this is the section in the Opta piece that Robert mentioned that talks about Major League Soccer. The second non-European league among the 10 highest rated top-tier competitions is MLS in ninth. They mentioned last year they had them jumping from 29th to 10th in 2023 in the process of storming ahead of regional rival Liga MX of Mexico. So MLS moved ahead of Mexico. That was in part in result of their team's respective performances in the League's Cup, which, look, there is limited data to determine the relative strength of leagues who are not consistently participating in the same competition. So the reason why it's so much easier to know where European leagues rank relative to one another is that they play each other in international competition. It happens. And now there's a third one. There's more information. It's the Champions League, it's the Europa League, and it's Conference League. And they're playing each other all the time. And Opta or whoever else wants to analyze it can go, oh, well, did Stoya Bucharest beat somebody from Austria? Well, then that means the Romanian league is better than the Austria, or whatever. Again, this is just, they try to collect all that information to get the best analysis possible. We don't have anything except MLS teams playing Mexican teams, and obviously MLS teams and Mexican teams playing other CONCACAF teams in the Champions Cup. That's the best we can do. Now, there will be some teams from MLS representing the league and the country in the Club World Cup next year, and who knows how that's going to adjust any of this. But, Opta's going by what they've got. We suggested Liga MX might bounce back on the basis of Mexican clubs doing well in duels with MLS sides in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but it appears MLS has consolidated its position as top dog in the region. Liga MX sits 13th with an average club rating of 76.7. And this is the charts that they put up in the piece. League average team power rating, and league top 10 teams average power rating. These are just measurements of the teams. And again, I'm you can go read the piece. It's deep in terms of the discussion about different leagues and things like that. And they've even got more charts for European leagues and things like that. I think the question always is if you took an MLS team out of the league and dropped them in, say, something like the English Championship, how would they do? Now, if we talk about the best team MLS has to offer, whether that's Miami, Columbus, LAFC over the last few years, I think those teams would do fine in terms of winning games. I'm not saying they would win the championship. I'm not saying they would win promotion automatically. I'm saying they would do fine. They wouldn't be played off the park in an embarrassing fashion. But as to whether or not that means the league is top 10 in the world, and in the English Championship, in these two charts, is just below Major League Soccer. So again, this is I don't have the full. I can pull up the full rating, like the full actual top 10 as they show it. But the English Championship is right there, right, with Major League Soccer. And Robert, you tell me, as an Englishman, you tell me.
Would an MLS team survive and get by in the championship?
Do you think the quality of the league, and this is
I think that the top end, to your point, I think the top end of MLS, the Inter Miamis and the Columbus Crews, maybe the LAFC and Galaxy and maybe Cincinnati, I think that they at the top end of their rosters could hang, but I think the rough and tumble nature of the championship and the sheer amount of games they play,
but you're
I don't think they
right. I know I phrased this as take an MLS team and put them in the championship, right? But for the purposes of Opta and the top 10 rankings of leagues in the world, is that the right mental exercise? Is that the right thought experiment? Because you're changing the context of MLS teams and putting them in a championship context. If you did the opposite, right? Nobody ever does the opposite because we're always prioritizing the European competition in our heads, and fairly so in most cases. But if you took a championship team, put them in Major League Soccer, now some of those teams have wage bills miles beyond MLS. I don't know what the cap is in the championship. It's like 50 million or something. I can't remember what the cap is. Somebody in the chat maybe knows what the cap is in the championship because they have the Football League does have wage restrictions. But if you took it a championship side, say mid-table, and you put them in Major League Soccer, and you said, okay, now you've got to play at altitude, you got to play in scorching hot weather, you've got to travel across the country on a regular basis. Do they hack it in Major League Soccer? Like, I think it's worth asking that. Quality-wise, we know it's there, especially at the top end of the championship, to be better than the MLS teams. Neutral venue, everybody's completely healthy. You're not playing in heat or adverse weather or altitude. If you're just playing in the absolute perfect place in the world, then the top end of the championship is probably going to beat MLS teams. I have no problem saying that. But does that mean the league is stronger top to bottom? That's a different question.
I think the championship is a great way to talk through this. I like that you did that because the championship has 24 teams, which is a lot, and there's definitely tiers within the league itself. So there's definitely the top 7 or 8 that are pushing for promotion. There's the solidly championship teams, and then there's the ones that are straight up struggling. And there is yo-yo teams between championship and League One as well. So I think that MLS might even contain nearly all of the 3 categories. I think the top might be in that top 8 conversation, and the majority are probably bottom half, just for that sort of second-hand sort of comparison. But on the contrary, I have often daydreamed of what Crystal Palace or a team of that ilk from England, like a solidly Premier League team, but not gonna win the league by any chance. What would they do in Major League Soccer? And I almost think that, especially last year's Crystal Palace, might run away with Major League Soccer because they had some amazing attackers. But I think that the championship is probably the best barometer from a place that is, the championship will never play against the MLS, so it's near impossible to say. But it is a fun thing to play with. I'm friends with, or I was friends with, someone who followed the national team around and was very, very close with the United States Soccer. And a few years ago, he believed that the Sounders with Obafemi Martins and Clint Dempsey was the one team he believed that could get promoted. And do you think that any of the current teams in MLS are better than that Sounders side?
I think the overall quality of the league has gone up since that was like 2014. We're talking something like 2015, maybe. We're talking about a decade almost. I think the general quality of Major League Soccer has gone up in the interim. I think scouting has gotten better. I think the type of players Major League Soccer signs down the roster has improved for the most part. That's interesting because you could argue that the top end talent, meaning in most cases we're talking DPs, right? The way that Major League Soccer is set up. The designated players in teams like the Galaxy teams that went back to back with Donovan, Beckham, Keane, that Sounders team with Obafemi Martins and Clint Dempsey, and I think Nico Ladero he arrived in 2016. That year they won the cup. I'm just trying to think of which other players were a major part of that Sounders team. Chad Marshall at the back, things like that. But obviously, like at the front end attacking talent, there are not a lot of teams in MLS who can boast that now. Or it's kind of a lightning in the bottle situation to pull all that together. I mean, I had somebody just argue with me or just mention to me the other day that they think the 2017 Toronto FC team that won MLS Cup and had Sebastian Javinko and Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore, that team may have been the best team we've ever seen in Major League Soccer. I think the depth of that team at the time was remarkable. But this is always a fool's errand to try to compare eras, and we are in a different era of MLS. Like, we are decidedly in a different era. And again, until you can find ways for these teams to play each other in meaningful matches, I just think it's always crazy to try to figure out who's better than whom across continents. Right? I think I haven't looked down the entire list. Actually, I'm looking at their top 10. So this is just the elite teams of each of these leagues and how they're rated. Premier League, Serie A, Bundesliga, La Liga, and Liga top 5. Everybody
big drop off after,
After that, yeah, it's a drop off. They have Portugal, Brazil, right? I know Brazil has talents. I know Brazil is a tough league. I know that there are lots of very good players down there. Many of them end up in Europe, obviously, but I think for me it's kind of really difficult to know the quality of Brazilian Serie A compared to anything happening in this part of the world or anything happening in Europe, because we just don't see those teams play each other. The Belgian league is after Brazil, ahead of Major League Soccer in this top 10. I mean, I think a lot of people probably dismissed the Belgian league. Right? Well, what was that? Maybe they've got two decent teams in all of Belgium, but that's probably not fair to Belgium. So again, this is a very difficult thing to pin down.
And
I think MLS probably is. I think MLS probably is. It's really hard to figure out how to prove any of that. And then again, you get into this question of people have visceral reactions to the idea that Major League Soccer could be a top. First of all, top 10 sounds impressive. I want to make sure that that's clear. Top 10 sounds impressive. But as we've just said, and has been said in the chat, after the top 5 leagues of Europe, the drop-off is significant. The amount of money being spent is significantly different when you go from 6 down to 10, right? So there are 20 candidates for those second 5 spots in the top 10, Robert. Like you could go Major League Soccer, the English Championship, the Belgian League, the Danish league. Where's the Eredivisie in this list? They're definitely in there, right? So the Eredivisie is clearly in that. I mean, in this chart, the Eredivisie is behind Major League Soccer in terms of their top 10 ranking. They're behind MLS in the league average team power rating as well. And I don't know. Historically, we care about the Eredivisie, Ajax and PSV and all that stuff. So again, I don't know, man.
An imperfect comparison, like you said, we're living in what ifs and hyperbole here. But Cucho Hernandez, Columbus Crew, one of the MVP candidates for the league.
Yeah,
he was a somewhat important player for Watford, and
right.
They are a 6th place team in the championship. So I mean that kind of puts things in somewhat of a contextual analysis as far as where like the players are and what kind of impact they can have.
Yeah, and look, I just want to say,
Okay.
it's important to remember. Now, again, there's 2 charts that I put up there on the screen, and let me see if I can put them back up so you can see them. League average team power rating. That's the entire league, right? Each one of these leagues, the entire league is averaged out in terms of their power rate. Remember that Major League Soccer has 29 teams, soon to be 30. That's a lot of teams compared to, it's the biggest first division in the world by a lot. Right? You mentioned that there are 24 teams in the championship. That's massive compared to everybody else, where it's 18 to 20, generally speaking. So this is the number of teams in MLS is a factor there, which I think is interesting. And then the top 10 teams average power rating. So these are just the best teams in the league, as opposed to the whole group. And Major League Soccer, according to Opta, if you buy into their methodology, ranks ahead of the Eredivisie, ahead of Argentina, ahead of the English Championship. And I think what you have to remember is, in that case, or I'm sorry, in the entire league case, but also maybe in the top 10 case sometimes, the bad teams are dragging everybody down, right? So in the Eredivisie, you may go, wow, they've got Ajax and they've got PSV. I mean, Ajax is where they're supposed to be. They have PSV Eindhoven, who just cleaned up last year.
That
they
bottom
have Alkmaar.
third, yeah.
That bottom third is dire in a country as small as the Netherlands with the amount of money. They don't spend money. They can't spend money. So how could that league be as strong as a 30-team league where pretty much everybody spends roughly the same amount of money?
Farther down that Opta analyst article, they actually rank the top 100 clubs in the world, and looking for MLS teams in between Heidenheim and Nottingham Forest. Placed number 68 on this Opta power rankings is the Columbus Crew.
Okay.
And looking down the list for another MLS team, you got to go scroll at 96, LAFC.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised to see this at number 100, Inter Miami.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is about you have a lag, you have a window of data that you're using to establish this. That's the best that Opta, anybody analyzing this, can do, right? You can't. This isn't opinion. It's not supposed to be. It obviously there are other factors here that we have to account for, but this isn't supposed to be opinion. It's supposed to be built on data. And if Inter Miami was not a playoff team last year and didn't have any international record to measure them by, I mean, a little bit in the Leagues Cup, but that's last year, right? It's not even that long ago that they're playing Leagues Cup matches against Mexican clubs. You just don't have anything. So this is also a thing that's interesting for MLS, right? I'm not saying it proves MLS is better than anybody else in Europe or anything in terms of league quality. Not saying it proves anything, but Major League Soccer, and this is something that definitely comes up when we get to the Champions Cup season. MLS has so much turnover over in terms of who's good and who's not. Like, things happen so quickly in MLS relative to a lot of other leagues. Sometimes in Mexico it definitely happens. The Bundesliga is much more, there's much more mobility in the Bundesliga than most of the top 5 leagues in Europe. But for the most part, in most of these leagues, the same 5 teams are going to be good every year. They're going to be good, right? They spend the most money, generally speaking, so they're going to be good. That's not really the case in MLS. Like, if you get a 5-year run of playoffs or winning a cup or being in the mix, making a maybe first place in the conference at the end of the winning a supporter, that's incredible. That's like an incredible achievement. 5 consecutive. Look at where Atlanta is right now, Robert. Look what Atlanta's going through, right? This doesn't happen as much, I think, in other leagues. Or maybe it does happen occasionally, but it feels as though MLS has much more of a possibility for clubs to come blossom into something and then drop right back down. And then that team who had a great season last year or a very good season last year and now has entered into the international competition, has lost half their roster, has turned over half their roster because of budget and league roster rules, and then they're going to go play Mexican teams and they're going to get crushed. And then their coefficient's going to drop. And then Opta's going to go, well, the league's not that good, right? Or the league gets penalized for those things. And I'm not even saying it's like a sad thing for MLS. It just kind of is the way MLS operates, maybe compared to some of these other leagues.
And another team that, speaking of the churn, LA Galaxy, one of the perennial powerhouses, went through quite a number of years with, not being near the top whatsoever. But I think that about does it for Monday's morning kick around. We are inching our way to 200 subscribers. That's really what's going to make this show grow. Click the subscribers button, or subscription button rather, and tell your friends, tell your family, anyone that'll listen, let them know about Morning Kick Around.
Yes, please do. That is, we implore you. Well, I'm not begging. That's too low. I'm not going to beg, but I will.
Not a sidekick and
nicely.
not a beggar. Okay.
Not a beggar, not a sidekick. Please. I'm asking you very nicely to tell somebody. That's the important thing. Tell somebody about Morning Kick Around, because we are going to bump up against the awareness issue as we move forward here on Morning Kick Around. So tell everybody and then if you haven't subscribed already, and as I mentioned several times over the last couple of weeks, we've been simulcasting on the Best Soccer Show channel on YouTube because I know a lot of people obviously follow me and what I'm doing with Jared over there on the Best Soccer Show. If you're watching on the Best Soccer Show channel, you need to go over to the Morning Kick Around channel to subscribe to the Morning Kick Around channel. Just double up. Please do that for us and kick those subscriber numbers to the moon, Robert. To the moon!
Shout out Gyro, or Hyro, however you pronounce it, new subscriber. Thank you for doing so. And shout out to Connor, best part of his first hour of work. So very cool to see. Thank you for tuning in. And we'll see what happens Tuesday night in Mexico. And we'll be back here Monday morning. Subscribe and see you later, guys.
Bye-bye.